The problem isn't that you don't work hard enough. The problem is that your income is trapped in a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 hour of your life exchanged for one fixed unit of currency. When you go looking for a side hustle to break that cycle, you usually find two things: get-rich-quick noise or passive income myths that completely ignore the reality of a 40-hour work week. Most side hustles fail not because of a lack of effort, but because of a misalignment of leverage. If you are living payslip to payslip, the solution isn't just more work. It's shifting how your work is structured. Today, we are moving past the hype to look at a tiered blueprint for side income, built for people who actually have a day job and who need stability first and expansion second. Most side hustle advice assumes you have 14 hours a day and zero stress. It ignores decision fatigue. It ignores commutes. It ignores the basic human need to recover. And if you try to launch a high-intensity income project at 7 in the evening after a full working day, you will likely burn out before the end of the week. So before we look at any specific opportunity, we have to acknowledge your real constraints: limited time, finite energy, and a low tolerance for financial risk. Side hustles aren't all created equal. Some create fast cash, but consume your available hours entirely. And others take months to build, but eventually decouple your income from your presence. Most people start with the wrong category because they're driven by urgency rather than strategy. There are 3 tiers worth understanding, and most people start at the wrong one. Tier 1, the quick cash floor. Tier 1 is about immediate breathing room. These are task-based services where you trade time for a predictable, though firmly capped, return. Think data entry, transcription, basic administrative tasks, and micro-gig platforms. The barrier to entry is low. You can start within days. The startup cost is effectively zero, and no specialist skill is required at the entry level. The trade-off is straightforward. Because the barrier is low, competition is global and intense. Income potential is limited by the hours you can realistically give, and at the rates typical of this tier, those hours add up slowly. And what people report earning here varies considerably depending on platform, task type, and consistency, but the ceiling is structurally low, regardless of effort. Tier 1 is not a long-term strategy. It is a bridging mechanism, a way to generate short-term cash flow while you build towards something with more leverage. If you stay here longer than necessary, it can actually hold you back, because the energy it consumes is the same energy you need to develop a Tier 2 skill. Tier 2, skill-based income. Once the immediate pressure is reduced, the next move is into skill-based income. This is where you stop being a task doer and start being a solution provider. Freelance writing, video editing, graphic design, technical documentation, specialized virtual assistants. These are services where skill commands a premium over time. You are still trading time for money at the start, but as your skill compounds and your reputation builds, the rate improves, and clients return. Referrals arrive. The income becomes more predictable. Setup is more involved than Tier 1. You need a basic portfolio, a simple online presence, and enough early work to demonstrate capability. The skill requirement is intermediate. Startup costs are generally low, mostly software or equipment you may already have access to. The time to first results is longer. Typically, 1 to 3 months before consistent income appears, though this varies considerably based on niche, positioning, and how actively you pursue clients. Some people report earning meaningful supplemental income within the first month. Others take longer. Results depend on skill level and follow-through on the business side of the work, not just the craft itself. The key distinction between Tier 1 and Tier 2 is this. In Tier 2, you are not paid for your time. You are paid for the result of your skill, and a competent editor can charge more for a single project than a Tier 1 worker earns across a full week of task-based output. That gap widens as the skill develops. This is your first genuine step toward decoupling income from hours. Most people who stall out on side income do so because they stayed in Tier 1 for months, hoping it will eventually scale. It doesn't scale. The structure doesn't allow it. Moving to Tier 2 requires a decision, not just more effort. Now, Tier 3, asset and platform leverage. Tier 3 is the long game. This is where you build something that continues to generate value when you are not actively working on it. Digital products, Notion templates Sati, niche guides, specialized spreadsheets, prompt libraries, stock assets. These are created once and, in principle, sold repeatedly. The income model is structurally different from services. The upfront time investment is significant, and the initial distribution phase requires active effort to build visibility. The setup difficulty is high relative to the earlier tiers. The skill requirement is intermediate to advanced, depending on the product, and the time to first meaningful results is typically 3 to 12 months, sometimes longer. This is the category that attracts the most hype and the most misrepresentation. The income is not passive in the early phase, and it becomes more passive as the systems mature and the audience grows. Most people who fail at Tier 3 do so because they attempted it before they had the skills, the distribution channel, or the financial stability to sustain the building phase without a return. Tier 3 requires your 9 to 5 to fund it. That's not a flaw in the model. That's the intended sequence. The hidden costs. At this point, it's worth addressing what most side hustle content leaves out entirely. And saturation is real across every tier. Tier 1 especially. You are competing with a global pool of people offering the same service at similar prices. Differentiation matters more than most beginners expect, and working harder is not a differentiation strategy. Burnout risk is consistently underestimated. Adding a side income to a full employment schedule means reducing recovery time. If results don't arrive within a reasonable window, the energy cost tends to outpace the financial return. And this is why matching the right tier to your current capacity is not a minor consideration. It is the central one. Platform dependency is a structural risk that rarely gets discussed. If your income relies entirely on one marketplace, one algorithm, or one platform's terms and conditions, you have traded one form of income concentration for another. Building a direct relationship with an audience or client base alongside any platform presence reduces this exposure over time. And the real cost of some side hustles isn't money. It's the mental energy required to eventually move to a higher tier. A Tier 1 activity that leaves you too depleted to develop a Tier 2 skill is not helping your long-term position, even if the short-term cash is useful. Choosing your starting point. The right entry point isn't determined by which opportunity sounds most appealing. It's determined by honest alignment between the opportunity and your current constraints. If you need financial breathing room within the next few weeks, start at Tier 1. Keep the time commitment manageable. Treat it as a cash flow bridge, not a career direction. If you already have a marketable skill, writing, design, research, project management, editing, move directly to Tier 2. The ramp is longer, but the ceiling is meaningfully higher. Tools that reduce setup friction, such as portfolio platforms, client management software, and AI-assisted workflow tools, and can accelerate the early phase. They don't generate income on their own, but they remove barriers that slow down the people who would otherwise earn it. If your current employment is stable, but your long-term ceiling feels fixed, begin building a Tier 3 asset alongside your existing income. Use that stability to fund the building phase. Email list tools, digital storefront platforms, and content distribution systems can help you organize an audience while the asset is in development. Again, these are execution multipliers, not income sources. The people who build durable side income over time tend to follow a recognizable sequence. Tier 1 for initial cash flow and discipline. Tier 2 as the primary growth vehicle. Tier 3 as a long-term layer added once the foundations are in place. That sequence takes longer than most content suggests. It also tends to last. 2 beliefs worth correcting. The first, that side hustles create fast financial freedom. Most create supplemental income first. Financial freedom, in any meaningful sense, comes from the long-term compounding of that supplemental income, not from the side hustle itself. The second, that passive income requires no work. Passive income is deferred income. You are doing the majority of the work up front for no immediate return, so that later the system can generate returns without your constant presence. That is a legitimate model. It is not an easy one. And the deeper problem most people face isn't just their income level. It's income concentration risk. Relying on a single payslip, a single employer's decision, is a genuinely fragile financial position. Diversifying across income tiers, gradually and intentionally, is how that fragility gets reduced over time. The goal of this framework is not to make you quit your job. It is to make sure your financial survival is not entirely dependent on one person's decision to keep employing you. And when you start viewing your available hours as leverage-building time rather than simply extra work, your approach changes. You stop looking for the easiest way to make an additional pound or dollar. You start looking for the most structurally sound way to build a system that compounds. Skills compound. Systems build leverage. Income sources diversify gradually. None of this happens quickly, and none of it happens without the work. Start where your situation actually is, and to build the foundations at the right tier. Then expand. Income follows leverage, and leverage takes time to build correctly.